Well, thank you for being here with me, talking about Voyage of Time. I want to start by asking, what was the first conversation that you had with Terrence about Voyage of Time after working with him before, and how was that, starting this project together?
Well, to be honest, it was one of the first things that we ever discussed when I met him. I should know the number of years, somewhere in the realm of 14 years ago. And there were a lot of ideas and movies on his mind. And this one was the one he was most excited about. He talked right away about, could we make a film this way? And, it would be about the history and the future of the universe. And it wouldn't have a typical, dialogue. It would have a kind of, questioning voiceover. And it would have all the most relevant facts of our universe that we could gather. And I remember getting very excited about it because I hadn't seen anything like it. And the idea of something like this through Terry Malick's eyes is thrilling. And now we got to do it on a big IMAX screen, which is doubly thrilling.
Yeah, I think for me it started through research assignments of early abstract filmmaking, ways to convey the essence of things through different forms and chemicals. And I knew it didn't relate to the film we were working on at the time, which was The New World. And so I had an idea it was for something in the future. And then I remember driving over Coldwater Canyon, and he started to, on the way to Warner Brothers, we were editing New World at the time, and he started to speak about this story, about the history of the universe. And then those car rides every day became more and more explanation. That was my experience of essentially reading the script, was just hearing him describe his vision for it, which was incredibly inspiring.
For me, I am the newest member to the Malick family, so I was approached about 4 or 5 years ago if I would be interested to work on a big documentary, because my past has been in documentaries, Planet Earth and Deep Blue, and that sort of long scale, big scale project. So I met Terry 4 years ago. I flew to Austin and I had 2 dinners with him actually, where he wanted to see how I feel about a film like this and what was driving me in my motivation in doing documentaries and everything, getting to know each other and trusting each other, and that was a very nice process.
In this movie, there are also some elements of Tree of Life. You're talking about things that are unknown. How is that, recreating something that we don't really know how it happened? I mean, the beginning of times.
Right. What we have is data, we have hypotheses, we have great scientific minds putting all the known data into one place and helping us figure out what it should have looked like or probably looked like or might have looked like. And then we took that and brought it to Dan Glass, our extraordinary visual effects supervisor, and said, now take this very rough simulation that's sort of good from an educational point of view and make it Maleckian, make it beautiful, make it extraordinary, make it extreme. And that was a really amazing process. Every step of the way, we would check back with the scientists to make sure we weren't going off track, to make sure that we were still being true to the science, true to the chronological nature of all the events, but to make it as extraordinary an experience as it could be for a viewer, to have an emotional response to the beauty and the extraordinary events they were witnessing.
Yeah, I think one of the exciting things about Voyage of Time is it does provide an opportunity to celebrate what we do know about our universe as a result of the incredible research that scientists have been doing for many years, as well as celebrating the mystery of what we still don't know. So Voyage is in many ways a fusion of that knowledge as well as a celebration of the mystery that even scientists themselves are still enchanted by.
Indeed.
Nothing to add to that.
Yeah.
And what is your personal connection with that, with the beginning of times? One of the things that they talk about in the film is learning from the past, that we can learn, about our future. How do you think that impacts you, and what are some of the discoveries that you made, while making this movie?
I think working on Voyage is a very humbling experience. It puts you in perspective of who we are, and actually I think everybody has his own personal experience in watching Voyage. It's everybody's story and it's everybody's personal story at the same time.
My dad is a scientist, so I grew up asking questions like this or being engaged in conversations like this. So it was really exciting for me to try to dig in and understand things like black holes and dark matter and all that stuff that I keep trying to understand, and I still kind of makes my head go in circles. And so the idea of exploring that in depth in a way that I can then experience with my heart is amazing.
Yeah, and I would say, echoing those great sentiments, it's easy today when you turn on any channel or pick up most publications to see a world that appears to be very divided. And this film is a reminder that we all share the same ancestry, no matter where we live in the world today, no matter what neighborhood we're in. We are all essentially coming from these same origins. And I think that looking at that in conjunction with this amazing planet and the life that it has birthed, it's also a reminder to care for what has been, so
You have a fascination for the beginning of time. So I wanted to start by telling me about that. When did that start, and what fascinated you the most about, talking about that theme in Voyage of Time?
Well, I doubt that it's a very personal fascination. I mean, in the sense that there's something that we all probably have a deep-rooted curiosity for, at least, in terms of where we come from. And the ultimate, in terms of where we come from, is actually the very origins of our universe and the cosmos. And it's fascinating, really, how much is being learned and discovered and theorized really every year. And that every year that goes by, the more we learn, and the deeper we appear to be able to peer into space and into the history of our own universe. And so, reading about that, learning about that, and with this project, Voyage of Time, having a chance to actually be required to learn about that and then try to find ways to represent that on a screen to, in some ways, raise curiosity and partially educate people has been a fantastic opportunity.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, talking about that, speaking of, recreating that on the screen, what are some of the things that you used, some of the techniques you mixed organic and digital photography in this movie, and how was that approach, with Terrence as well?
So, I mean, this project, literally involved the full gamut of techniques that we have in the filmmaking kind of toolbox these days. And we always put an emphasis on trying to find analog solutions to things, whether it was photographic source material or at least photographic reference that we could adapt and augment. And where none of those were possible, we would film or set up scenarios that could represent either in an abstract form or sometimes a more literal representation of things, whether it's the early stages of the universe, which depict kind of asteroid belts hanging in space that began to coalesce to form the planets of our solar system. We would use techniques like scattered salt crystals on a disk that spins with a very harsh backlight that represents the sun. You film that at the right frame rate and the right kind of contrast of light, and then afterwards maybe just paint in a few little details around. It's really amazing how powerful that can communicate the idea that we were trying to. And that's, of course, just one example. There are also instances where things are far more abstract that nobody really knows how to depict. And so for those, we often went to science itself and collaborated closely with some of the world's leading experts in different fields. For example, dark matter. Dark matter is something that a lot of people have heard talked about, and the theories seem to uphold its existence, but we have no evidence. We can't photograph it per se. And so there are data sets that exist that show this incredibly beautiful lattice-like structure for how they theorize that dark matter exists or is spread out through our universe. And we took those data sets, worked with the scientists to turn those into images that were not just diagrammatic or schematic, but that actually look kind of beautiful in their own right. And whilst I think probably somebody watching the movie for the first time won't understand what those structures are, if it raises their curiosity to find out a bit more about it, they'll learn that a shot like that, the dark matter shot, in fact every shot in the piece has a rich story behind it and a science that is behind its the cause of it.
Yeah, on that same line of recreating things that of the unknown that we don't know what they would look like the dinosaurs that you have in the movie, and it's also a theme that is a recurring theme from Tree of Life to Voyage of Time. Tell me a little bit about recreating the dinosaurs and also what that represents for you and for Terry as well. That's such a strong representation.
Well, the thing about a lot of the early creatures that don't exist today is we do know a tremendous amount about them by now. In terms of their skeletal movement, we're able to understand from the way the skeletons are formed, like how the muscle systems must have worked and the kind of bulk and the mass that must have sat on top of those skeletons. What we don't necessarily know is coloration and the literal kind of feel of how their skin would have been. But there are good theories because we can draw analogs of how we believe the descendants of those creatures have evolved. And so from that we can deduce, fairly, with a good assumption, what these things look like. But for Terry in this project, what was probably more important even than how they looked, because he didn't want the look to be something that you kind of were drawn to or starstruck by, but actually something that almost felt just more natural and just sat within its world. And for him, what was more important was that these creatures felt like they could emote, like they represented a point in the evolution of consciousness, almost of a beginning of self-awareness in animals or in creatures that predated anything that obviously we have evolved to become.
And using nature as a main character in the film as well.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. And so throughout wherever we could, we photographed and took real creatures that we know existed a long time ago. Obviously, the landscapes that can stand in, like Iceland, which is a land predominantly without trees or very little vegetation, so that can work for a very early era of the Earth, and it's very convincing because it's real still.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Okay.